Good evening and welcome to this evening of webinar examining the navigation business impact of COVID-19. There are insights from survey of Italian industries and we are going to examine the impact of that on Indian industries. We have a very eminent panel with us today. Professor Alberto Grando comes from the background of extensive research, extensive interaction with industries and consulting, covering areas of operations management and supply chain management. And we also have Professor Marco Bertucci, who again is a luminary as far as supply chain and technology is concerned. I am Abhijit Chaudhary, and I host this program as a fellow on behalf of SDA Bocconi Asia Center. This is a collaborative attempt between SDA Bocconi in Milan and Asia Center in Mumbai. As we have a large group of audience today, very, very high profile student managers, those who are getting ready as digitally born managers, walking into a new world which has changed all kinds of paradigms. With them, we have a large number of alumni, those who are holding positions in the industry and business, and those who are making a change in the place to step in time with what future holds for us. And we also welcome a large number of participants from the industry and business. Welcome to you all. This program is in 4 tracks. The first 3 tracks are going to be explanation of the findings of the survey, the way Italy moved out of lockdown into the initial stages of opening up and already ready with their plan for going for the future strike. There are 2 sessions for that, each having around 20 minutes between Professor Grando and Professor Bertucci. And that will be followed by the 3rd track, where I'll be covering the impact of that on Indian industries and business. Having done that, we will leave it for audience interaction, where we have kept about 15 minutes, hoping that there are going to be a number of questions which will be coming up from the audience. And we will hope to have enough time to answer to all the questions. If there's a paucity of time, then we will have to manage. We'll have to actually select some of the questions. So the instructions at this point of time is you will not have access to the audio to ask the question. You'll only have access to your chat. In the chat, you can put your question. The questions are going to be parked, and those are going to be seen by us at the end of the 3rd track, as I've explained to you. Thereafter, depending on where the question belongs, we will then distribute it among ourselves and we will answer them. There is going to be a possibility for you to send additional questions at the end of the webinar, which is going to be in the SDA Bocconi Asia Center. It's info@sdabocconiasiacenter.com. You can put your questions into that. We will make a bank out of it and we will answer those going forward. So with this, I welcome Professor Grando to start the first part of the survey of the Italian industries. Professor Grando, please welcome him.
So thank you very much. Thank you and good evening to anyone. I hope you can hear me. Just a quick check. I really want to thank Professor Abhijit Chaudhary because we met sometimes in Mumbai, and then we started working together. The idea is to develop, let's say, some programs, some activities together, both for the Asia Center and Bocconi, given the common, let's say, interest. I feel there are a lot of alumni, students, and managers, so thank you very much for joining. I would say that it's a great pleasure for myself and for my colleague here to take advantage of this unfortunate situation for doing something together, even if online. Now I'm trying to let's say share my screen to start the presentation we prepared. Let me just check if everything is doing well. I hope you can see now the presentation. As Professor Chanduri mentioned before, the idea is to analyze on our site a very quick, let's say, overview of the impact of the pandemic on global economy in general, but especially on Italian economy. And then we report a synthesis of a survey we made with about 300 companies, mainly manufacturing companies in Italy. Then I will leave the floor to my colleague, Professor De Tucci, for a focus on operations and supply chain management. And I'll be back to some comments related to the, let's say, the crisis plan and the lessons we learned from the recovery plan implementation. And as we mentioned before, at the end, Professor Chanduri will introduce, let's say, the Indian perspective and the lessons learned from India. Let me just quickly say that unfortunately the pandemic, the coronavirus impacted almost all countries, and especially in some European countries like Italy, in a very fragile situation. 2019 was a year in which Italy grew just 0 point something in terms of GDP, and now the situation is much worse. I have here just a picture coming from the International Monetary Fund, which is forecasting the situation for any country. Let's say in Italy, just a few months ago, we had a forecast of a drop in the GDP of 9%, and now the new forecasts are talking about 12.8%. Even the EU is forecasting a drop for all countries, and unfortunately, again, Italy is one of the worst in that situation. And in addition, if we would move to the 2021, we see that there is for sure a rebound. In many countries, this rebound can be between 60–70%. And in our country, we forecast a rebound of, let's say, 50% of the drop. So what does it mean? It means that this crisis, which was a kind of sanitarian crisis, and then turned into economic and social crisis, will last more than a few months or 1 year, and we think that probably we will have a crisis lasting until 2021, and probably for some industries even more. I'm presenting here another forecast that has been built here in the north of Italy, where we have, I would say, 80% of the GDP. You see there are two different lines. Okay, one is kind of base scenario in which we guess to have.
To interrupt, Professor.
Yes.
I think there has been some issue with the audio, so if you can just check if there is anything from your end.
Can you see?
Now it's better, I guess. I request everyone to please mute their audios and switch off their videos as well, so that they can hear clearly. Professor, you can start, I guess.
Because it seems to be mute, but I'm not mute.
Now it's pretty much clear, but there was some issue with the audio. Well,
okay.
You can continue.
Okay, I can continue. So what I was saying is that we had two different forecasts. One is the base scenario with the forecast that the pandemic will end before the summer, and the second scenario with the pandemic impact, the strong impact, until the end of the year. You see here the two lines, the yellow one and the red one, is between 8% and 18% in 2020. This is the drop. And you see also that in 2021, we can recover the situation, but not entirely. So that's why we think that we will have, let's say, at least 2022 kind of result of this crisis. Now, the very last forecasts are more or less in, okay? So the idea is that probably we will have a drop of between 9–11% in 2020, and a recovery of 50–60% of this drop in 2021. This is a very quick chart I want to show you related to the impact of the lockdown, specifically in Lombardy. Take into consideration Lombardy is a region accounting for 30% of the economy. Back to the March 12th, we had about, let's say, 76% of companies were open and working. And after 2 weeks, okay, it was opposite. You see that almost, let's say, 70%, 76% was locked down. Some manufacturing companies still continue to work because of technological constraints. And especially in service industry, we had a huge drop. Now, the survey we made has been conducted by trying to understand what happened during the March period, so March, April, during the tough lockdown we had, which is the forecast for the next months until the end of 2020, and the forecast for the next year. Just a very quick, let's say, overview of the respondents. As I mentioned, we did quite a quick survey on companies. We received 300 questionnaires. Out of them, 262 were completed. You see that most of the respondents are belonging to the operation supply chain roles or top management, like general manager, CEO, I mean, the top of the pyramid, and some others coming from different let's say, functions. In terms of industries, most of them are typical manufacturing industries, so chemical, pharmaceutical, mechanical, machineries, equipment, food and beverage, until, let's say, automotive, textile industries. Now, the size of the company, as you probably know, Italy is mainly made by small and medium-sized companies. And you see here that almost 50% of the respondents, so 40%, 50%, belongs to the small and medium-sized companies. I would say that if we take the overall sample, let's say 60% is produced outside of Italy in other plants, and we check also those plants. So the revenues are originated especially in Italy, in the very small, let's say, companies. And the more we grow, the more you see that there is a clear, let's say, international environment. Now, we want to just highlight some points, and I think there are some lessons learned we can share. This is the revenue dynamics during the lockdown and the forecast in the two periods. The periods between now and December 2020 and next year. And as you can see, I mean, in terms of potential drop, you see that almost, let's say, 85%, I'm talking about to the top right, top left, let's say, picture where Italy is. So Italy means this is the volumes produced in plants located in Italy. And the right side is plants located abroad belonging to Italian companies. You see that in March, April, almost 85% of our companies had a drop. In some cases where you have the dark red, almost 1/3, so 32% of those companies had a huge drop, moving from 40 to 80% drop. This is clearly related to the lockdown. Then if we move now, where we have a kind of recovery situation, you see that, I mean, the dark red is reducing, but in any case, still, till the end of this year, we forecast to have between, let's say, 60–80% companies declaring a reduction, let's say a smaller reduction than what we had in the past, but in any case, a reduction in revenues, and just 20% belonging to some specific industries are increasing the revenues. The abroad is more or less the same. Now, we stratify the analysis for different industries. I just show you the two extreme, okay, the best and the worst. And you see that the best is the chemical pharmaceutical companies that in 2020, 2021, forecast quite, let's say, 90% of recover, okay, in 2021 especially. And the worst, which is unfortunately the automotive. The automotive industry is the most hurt, let's say, from the situation. And in any case, in Europe, I don't know in India, but in Europe, we had a very, let's say, negative dynamic also in 2019. For instance, Germany had a big drop in the sales of automotive industry, and this is affecting the suppliers, which are mainly located in Italy. I have some good news. The first good news is that by using the PMI, which is the Purchasing Management Index, which is a predictive index, one semester in advance, we see that there is a positive trend, okay? Usually the PMI, when it's in 50%, is neutral. We had 51 in March, so it was almost neutral. We had a drop in 1 month to 31. Now we are recovering to 45, 47. So we hope to come back in a positive situation. A couple of comments related to some statistical analysis we made. I think that can be interested in analyzing which is the impact of the lockdown in terms of liquidity and cash constraints to our company. You see that, for instance, companies that had a drop in revenues during the March-April period, so during the lockdown, show delays in payment to suppliers. So they are, let's say, there is a cascade of effect along the supply chain, a reduction in the investment, and a higher use of furloughs, any kind of, let's say, a buffer for managing in a proper way the layoff. And the same, if you go to the right side, you see that companies that suffer delay in trading receivable from the customer, and they didn't have a risk management plan, I will be back on that, I'll come back on that later on, estimate a future reduction in revenues and a huge impact in terms of layoff. I'll be back on layoff in a few seconds. So what does it mean? It means that there is a kind of strong correlation between what's happened during the lockdown and especially companies where that have a kind of fragile situation. They had an impact, which is, let's say, moving also into suppliers, investments, and people. Now, if I take just a snapshot on the labor situation, you can see that here 60% of the sample companies are use any kind of tool for let's say, reducing the impact on the labor cost, and 20% of them estimates to continue its use in 2021. Just 80% are forecasting, I mean, to come back to the original situation. In terms of layoff, and then I think that the Indian perspective is interesting on this point, we see that almost 15% of the companies reduce the workforce, and they are still thinking to do it in the next months and the next year. You must know that in Italy right now, by law, is impossible to lay off people until probably the fall, for protecting, let's say, the workers and the employment. But we know that as soon as companies will be allowed to do it, we will have a strong impact in terms of unemployment. The last two pictures, before leaving the floor to Professor Marco Bettucci, is the impact on working capital. You know, anyone knows that during the crisis, one of the big issues is liquidity, is cash constraints, and you see how is the situation in Italy, or it was in Italy in this period. 80% of the companies suffer in terms of relevant delays in terms of trade receivables. So customers, even if they buy, they are not willing to pay. And this is a big issue. And even in 2001, those companies are forecasting, 50% of those companies are forecasting to still have some cash issues. In terms of payment to the suppliers, I don't know if this is just a hope or is the reality. You see that only 1/3 of the sample company delayed payments to supplier, and 21, 1/5 estimates that the situation will persist in 2021. What does it mean? It means that, I mean, companies are suffering, but especially wise company or the company that are able to do it, they try to reduce as much as they can the impact on the suppliers. They are aware of that, the supply chain, the pipeline is key for surviving and competing today. So they try to absorb as much as they can the liquidity tension. The last slide of this first batch is related to the impact on working capital along the supply chain. And you see that, again, companies that suffer delays in trade receivable during March and April, which was the lockdown period in Italy, they suffer, of course, higher reduction in terms of revenues and lower propensity to invest in the future. This is a big problem because in many industries, in 2019, there was a budget for investing in developing the business. And as we will see later on, some of those companies now are not able to face this kind of investment. The second point is that they are increasing the delay in payment to suppliers. They are asking additional financial resources to the government, to the banking system, and they will increase the use of layoff. So, moving into a short comment here, the point is that at least in Italy, I think in Europe, I honestly don't know in India, this is not a V-shape, let's say, crisis. Probably it will be a U-shaped crisis. So the effect of this crisis, especially on companies, will last at least in 2021, probably in some industry also in 2020 and 22. So this is the first quick, let's say, snapshots. Now I leave the floor to my colleague here for presenting, let's say, a kind of focus on supply chain management. Please, Marco.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you, Abhijit. Thank you to Asia Center, and good evening to everyone. I want to share with you some figures and some considerations about the impact of COVID-19 on supply chain management. And I start on changes from the demand side, the supply side, that the Italian managers highlighted. Above, you can see that in green, you can see that 80% of managers think that market demand will remain uncertain and unstable. And in particular, above, you can see that the 80% of managers think the uncertainty, the unstable of market. And so we have a demand side uncertainty. Then in the graph below, you can see the impact on the supply side. So you can see that a lot of managers, the 69% think that some supplier will fail, and the 51% think that we have an increasing on merger and acquisition operations, and so an increasing also in the supply side uncertainty. Just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, if we put together the degree of demand and supply uncertainty, we can identify 4 different supply chain management approaches. If demand and supply uncertainty are low, you can have a so-called lean supply chain. So the aims of the lean supply chain of this approach are waste reduction, focus on economies of scale, stock reduction, production, warehouse centralization, and so on. In synthesis, you have to get efficiency. If you have only demand side uncertainty, you need a responsive supply chain, and we talk about the responsive supply chain. If you have only a nice supply side uncertainty, we talk about rescheduling supply chain. If you have you are in a nice demand side and nice supply side uncertainty, we have to respond with an agile supply chain. So increasing the supply chain visibility and collaborations, alternative sourcings, spare capacity, short lead times, and so on. And so you have to get flexibility and agility. And we think, and the managers think that companies will move from the lean supply chain to an agile supply chain approach. But obviously, an agile supply chain approach is more expensive. And so companies and managers have to balance this approach with the right cost in this moment in which, from an economical and financial point of view, we have some problems. And to have an agile supply chain, you need to be resilient. You need a resilient supply chain to above all to support the external risk in a way that we can call risk agnostics. Because today the problem is the COVID-19, tomorrow could be duty from USA, day after tomorrow could be an environment disaster, and so on. So you need to create in your supply chain the antibodies to react to this risk. And we have identified 4 main areas to improve, which you have to work, companies have to work. The first is the supply chain design. The second is the supply chain planning and control. The third is the supplier relationship management. And the last one is the distribution channel and assortment. From a supply chain design point of view, companies have to rethink the production, the supply footprint to balance local, regional, and global suppliers, and so to get the right shoring. So you get alternative in terms of supply. Then from a make or buy point of view, we think, and managers think, that we have to balance the activity performed in internal way or in external way to minimize the single sourcing situation. And this is good also for the distribution network. So to identify different warehouses, different possibility to reach your customer, maybe focusing on market channels and different products that companies deliver to customers. For this point, we have two figures from. We have some problem with the slide.
I don't know why.
Okay. You can see above in the blue graph that the 43% of managers declare a review of its supplier list, and you can see in the graph below that the guidelines are more about an addition of supplier, more than a replacement suppliers, and more on local sources than global sources. And then we have a movement from supplier to proper plants production, and so with an internalization of activities in the plants, like in the financial crisis of 2008 or 2011, when the saturation of the plants decrease, companies move production inside their plants, and so I think we think that in this crisis we have the same figures, and so the increasing of the agility about suppliers. From the distribution, we have an increase in number of logistic operators. We have 37% of companies that declare a review of the distribution strategy, 6 logistic operators to be added to the current ones, and for the business to consumer industry, we have an increase of specialized operators, logistic operators in e-commerce management, because, as you know, the sales from the e-commerce sales in this pandemic is increasing, and so companies is thinking about different supply chain for different channels. For the supply chain planning and control area, we can see when we have an impact on the processes, on planning processes, and we think, managers think that the sales and operation processes will become even more important, moving towards an integrated business planning approach that has two more aspects. The first is to have always an economic and financial perspective in the plan, so move from quantity figures in tons, meters, pieces, and so on, to euros, and to operate with the scenario planning approach to simulate the impact of changes in demand and supply in a very fast way. Then you need to revise, companies have to revise the stock management policies because we need a self-adaptive system of stock level along the supply chain, increasing the frequency, and integrate the safety stock approach with the strategic stock, not linked with normal variables like lead time or demand variability and so on, but linked to the external risk. An increasing of vertical collaboration, and then companies have to build a supply chain control tower, because if you want to replan very quickly, you need to know the actual situation in terms of execution processes. So you have to have sensors able to activate these short reaction loops. From the supplier relationship management point of view, the main process that is affected by the the pandemic is the process of vendor qualification, selection, auditing, and rating, introducing more characteristics in this process to have suppliers more coherent with the agile supply chain, we are talking about. Increasing the visibility along the supply chain, also to second fourth tiers, not only the first, and to develop culture and tools of supply chain finance to support supplier from a financial point of view that is, like Alberto explained us, is a main point to cover. We ask to managers the main focus. You can see some of the points that I talked about. We have a 56% of companies investing in collaborative planning with suppliers, 51% that focused on qualification, assessment process, and so on. And then we have a 16% of companies that think to support supplier investments, and in some cases also with equity. From the distribution channel assortment, we have we think that the commerce sales that increased in last month will move companies to rethink the distribution strategy, the network, and the product portfolio in an omni-channel way. And so to have sometimes dedicated supply chain from a distribution point of view. I want to share with you the figures about another questions of the survey about the investments in digital innovation. We asked managers the main technology application in which they were investing before Italian lockdown. You can see that the number of projects was very high. We have 51% of companies investing in data collection about production processes, 47% in information system to support planning and processes, 43% for automation of production processing, and so on. So high percentages. And a lot of companies were thinking about adoption of this technology. We ask also if after COVID-19, these investments will be confirmed or blocked. And you can see on the right the percentage of companies that declare a stop on investment. So for each application, for example, for information system to support supply chain planning processes, we have less 12%. So we will have a block of some investments in digital innovation. So I finish with a last chart, and then I leave the floor to Abhijit about the roadmap to resilience. So you have to move to a resilient supply chain, and this pass through an in-depth but quick readiness assessment, mapping the supply chain, mapping the main vulnerable processes, the main risk, and to rethink the 4 areas that we talk about in these minutes, and I present you. And so we think, and managers think in this survey, that supply chain management, information communication technology become even more strategic, and it will be very important to reach economic and financial figures for next months and next years.
So thank you, Marco. I think now I can pass the baton to Professor Abhishek Chantruri. I had some other slides. Maybe I can keep it for the Q&A, let's say, session if it's needed, because I think we are a bit in late. So Abhijit, the floor is yours. I switch off my sharing and is up to you now.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you, Marco. I think it's been...
Can't hear you.
Okay. Ruchi, can you please give me rights for the audio? Am I audible now?
You are audible, sir.
Thank you very much. It's been excellent opportunity to get the insights from the Italian perspective. Now, I will, on the basis of where both Alberto and Marco left, and start from there and give you the Indian perspective. What I have done is I have delved into data which was sent by CII. CII had gone into a snap poll of Indian CEOs, and a view has been presented by them on certain aspects, but I have picked up a few because there's no point trying to go into the full details of it. So the first one is revenue dynamics. You can see there are two bars. There is one, the light blue one, which is of the research by Alberto and Marco. And the light gray is where CII data has been presented. Now you will find that there are areas where there's a lot of resonance. If not in a single block, like the revenue dynamics, loss of 40% or more, Indian companies felt that 65% of the companies felt that there is going to be a revenue reduction of the order of 65% as against 11% of what Italy has responded to. Now, here is a very interesting aside that I must share with you, the PMI. It was briefly mentioned, the Purchase Managers Index. Alberto spoke about that. Now, there are two aspects of PMI that comes in. One is PMI for manufacturing, and the other one is PMI for service. Now, PMI for manufacturing for India in the month of April was 27. 50 is the neutral field. Below 50 is contraction. Above 50 is expansion. You can, relatively, you can imagine when you say it is 27, it is far below the norm. In April, it was 27. In May, it was 32. In June, it is 47. And 2021, the outlook is 51. That means we are just expecting the CEOs from the Indian perspective, the CII snap review that was done, it is expected that the contraction is going to be done with and we'll start getting into the expansion area in 2021. So that's the overview that we are getting from this. The sense of contraction is very, very clear. From the chart on the left, you can see both the data. The percentage of respondents who are thinking about less than 40% is 32.5% in the CII data. While if you go up, you'll find that between 0 and 20%, the Italian data was 54%. CII data is 9.9%, which is of course for 0 to 10%. It's not 0 to 20. In all the parameters are not the same, but you can get a clear sense, the clear sense of having stagnated. I think it is a experience that we have never had before. It's going to be difficult for us to live through this phase, but the indications are that from manufacturing point of view, the sentiments are going to look up. Maybe the Make in India, Make for India is going to do the trick, and we are possibly going to enter the expansion from the contraction area. In the next slide, we have talked about the layoff data, which is extremely, is very visible that though painful it is, you'll find that the contraction up to 30% is 80% of the respondents in Italy felt that the contraction is going to be up to 30%. In CII data, the Indian scenario, we are seeing a 64% kind of figure. while between 30 and 60% layoff, the Italian data is showing 17%, while we are talking about 29%. Now, there are many, many questions which will come up around this data coming from the CII side, because the representation is actually something which is more in the organized area. The moment you go into a unorganized, the micro enterprises, the small, medium enterprises, maybe much of the data is not really going to be available there. And that is reflected in the service PMI. The service PMI in April was 5.4%. You can appreciate that the Indian economy is represented by about 2/3 of the economy is represented by service. And in that 2%, the PMI for the month of April was 5.4 against a norm of 50, which is neutral. You can imagine the entire service backbone seems to have completely crumbled. It had improved to 12.6% in the month of May, and in June it is struggling at 32.7%. But there is one silver lining in the whole thing is 2021, it is expected that the figures are going to go to 53%. PMI service for 2021 is going to be 53%, which is actually moving away from the gloom that we are in right now into something which is going to be more in the positive, more in the sunshine area. And most of us who are experiencing the work from home right now, we are realizing that a part of service has actually improved more than what it started off with. I have some details on that, I'll be talking about it. But the second comparison that I thought is very important from our side is to look at the layoff data, and we can see great resonance coming into that. Going into the next slide, where Italian survey data shows 80% of the respondents think market demand will remain unstable for many months. It's difficult to give the numbers. I can understand the CEOs when they're responding to a survey like this, they have a lot of worries that they have to put it all together to come to a more convincing scenario for themselves. Similarly, in the CII data, we are seeing the consumer confidence has dropped by almost 37%. So from the consumption point of view, Indian scenario looks to be better than the Italian scenario. We are thinking that 37% are expecting that there is a drop. If you go into the details of that, you find that the current situation index, as it moved from March 19, we have taken the comparative figures of March 19, and you can see that the future expectation index right through has always been high, always been high. We have been a very, very euphoric market. In March 19, when there was absolutely no signs of any pandemic coming in, the current situation index was at 100%, while the future was about 135%. That means we are expecting the future is going to be better. Future is going to be better. And entire manufacturing and service backbone was being built on the basis of this expectation that is going to be a expansion, is going to be expansion. And if you go back into the PMI data, you'll find the PMI data has been consistently 55 plus, 55, 55.2. That's a kind of a PMI that we maintain both for manufacturing as well as service. But if you come back into the March 20, you find that the current situation index had actually dropped, yet we felt that the future is going to be good. And we are saying only going into the month of June, we are realizing that the future expectation index has fallen below 97. So the expectation in the marketplace is that we have a sound marketplace, we have got huge consumption, and we have got tremendous potential. As Professor Alberto mentioned right in the beginning, that we have a great similarity in our size of industries. Like Italy, we are also a predominantly MSME, small and medium enterprises. The number of the such enterprises are far more. We have many, many more small and micro enterprises, which are actually keeping the whole clock moving continuously. There's a lot of localization that is happening. Services are finding new phases to enter. And that's how the Indian market is still being very, very hopeful for the future. There's been a lot of incentives that's been announced by the government. A lot of financial schemes have come in. Liquidity has become much easier, except that because of very low consumption, very low on the demand side, we are still not having enough to supply to meet with the kind of expectation that is there in the background. Now, what is the lesson out of it? Marco covered the tactical areas. He talked about supply chain. He talked about which buckets the supply chains are going to be engaged in to move from breakdown into a slow move into the future, and then how are we going to be standing up and then running. And he talked about a few tactical areas. There are some questions that may come to your mind. Please park them. Please put them into the chat board so that we can take those questions as we come back, because we would like to have a fairly good understanding from your side as well. And the only way you can do that is by having questions being asked by you. But what is the lesson that we are learning out of it? Marco mentioned that from a lean, we have to move into agile, from lean into agile. You know, the whole world has been moving into lean in the 70s, in the 80s. Lean was the mantra. You actually arrived if you practice lean, because lean told you that you're not going to make any wastage of anything. But a time has now come when we have to respond to the marketplace very quickly, and therefore the mantra of agility that comes in. And we have now got to see what the responses of the business constraints are bringing in terms of the organizational dynamics. So the comparison, about 70%, some suppliers will fail, is what was a finding there. We are talking about 75%, where we talked about a complete shutdown of operations. The supply chain completely crumbled. The PMI of April, 2.7 for manufacturing, 5.4 for service, shows that it completely broke down. There was absolutely nothing that anyone could have done about it. And there are different buckets where it has moved. No access to raw materials is 32.9. Again, that's a story where it tells you that there has been enough inventory in the pipeline that they could manage the intervening period. And therefore, still there could be supplies which would come in. From a lean perspective, that may be a wrong thing to have, because you are now talking about inventory being high, that you could manage with available inventory. The WIP, the work in progress, was enough to sustain us for 2.5 or maybe 2 months. Lean may be saying it is bad, but Agile may say that was good, because that's the only way that you could keep the marketplace going. So there is a very clear indication that we got to move away from our current state. The current state of stability. All through the industrialization of the world, we have learned that we need to be stable. At any cost, we need to be stable. We need to be in a position to build our business plans for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and we need to be there. We need to have our existence going continuously. The current pandemic has brought in a whole new view to the entire perspective of being in business. It is very clearly telling us that we need to be resilient. We need to move away from stability, and we need to be resilient. And I have a very interesting old world thinking of AAA supply chain, as we called it, the AAA supply chain of agility, adaptability, and alignment. All these A's will have now to be kicked in to become resilient. And this is where the organization has to take a complete relook. We have to rethink how the organization is going to be behaving to be able to move into this stage of resilience. Resilience is a little beyond agility. Resilience is not alone agility, but it is also adaptability, and it is also alignment. How is it going to be done? Now, the managers in India are very clear that we have actually moved away. You know, this is a very interesting strategic document coming from Donald Rumsfeld. It is actually known as the risk matrix. And it says that known and known unknown are the two things that we are pretty well aware of and we can manage. But it's unknown is where COVID-19 has brought us face to face with something that was not there. One day we just woke up to a new world, completely unknown. One day we woke up to a world that we can't move out of our own homes. And as it went along, we found that more and more things are now becoming different than what it was before. We have some of these explanations. So I have taken the next step at a strategic layer, what the Indian industries are thinking of. Largely, some of the industries have actually recovered in a good way. There are many industries, there are many services which are actually doing 50% more and 60% more than what they were before COVID. Food distribution, that's one industry which has actually taken the bull by the horn, and they have actually reimagined themselves, and they have come out absolutely the winners. All of us in India, we are aware of it, and I'm sure in Italy the story is no different. So let us look at this unknown, and let us look at what the strategic issues are going to be. And this is where the four critical attributes are working out. First one is networkability. Coming out of COVID, the supply chain is realizing that it has to ceaselessly establish connections. It's breaking many of the old norms that we had, and it's coming in with new strategic perspective. Networkability is one of the pillars which is coming in the center for. Second pillar is heterogeneity. We have all believed that the time has come when we have to be in a position to handle dissimilar perspectives. It's not going to be the same as before. That I am good at making a particular kind of a product, therefore I'll continue to make that particular product. This pandemic has taught us that we have to be really searching for balancing factors which may be away from the homogeneity that we are aware of. A fashion company has to look at the safety supplies, the personal protective equipment supplies as a heterogeneity. That's the next pillar which is coming out very, very clearly. The third one is multiplicity. A multiplicity is, in the most basic sense, a complex structure that does not reference to a prior unit. It means that if I have been doing something well in a particular way, I need to continue to do that continuously. But times have changed. Those who are the brick and mortar retail, they have realized that I have also got to be there in the e-commerce area. The entertainment, the cinema halls, who were looking at delivery given to you in the form of a screen and a hall, they are suddenly realizing that over the top is the mantra now. There are many stories in India right now that some of these openings on the OTT platforms have done extremely well, much better than what a physical screen would have given. 1,000 screens could not give them something as OTT streaming did it for some of the recent entertainment movie releases that has happened. So that's the third pillar which is standing out. And the fourth pillar, the most important pillar, is a relational realignment, that we got to rethink our relationship between the resources that we use for the service or the product that we bring to the marketplace. So the supply chain will be experiencing bottlenecks, but these unexpected circumstances, it must be eliminated, and we must be in a position to outmaneuver anything that is coming as a roadblock, and we must find alternate routes. Many examples of that. Right now, if you look at the last mile delivery in India, you'll find that most of the retail companies, they have found a very smart answer to your problem of the logistics disruption that happened in the country. I will take a little time to take you to some of the clear winners during this period, and a little before that, because they're the ones who have actually set up this kind of a tone for the marketplace. Networkability, the example is of Uber. Its collaboration with MoveIt app allows users to plan their journeys using bus, train, bike sharing, car sharing, and many, many micro applications of that kind has come into nooks and corners of the whole country. Today, there are delivery boys who are actually riding their bicycles. Connect India is one of the projects that has done extremely well. They have brought in people delivering the products at the last mile on their bicycles. And it's been extremely well received in the marketplace. Reliance Retail has collaborated with Facebook. It has leveraged its WhatsApp platform, over 400 million users. They have gone into the pop and mom stores, the street corner stores. They are coming onto their platform. That's what Reliance has actually brought up in their platform. These are the kind of things which are happening. Oyo, They have digitized the end-to-end hotel reservations from onboarding, transformation, customer service to monitoring progress, everything. ITC, you know, the golden boy of our country, who have actually revolutionized the agricultural market. They have brought in e-Chopal system. During this COVID time, e-Chopal has brought in the micro-local presence is being felt by everybody in the farming community. So networkability has stood out to be one of the major pillars which is coming through this at a strategic level. Heterogeneity, we have the education sector, Byju's, many of us are aware of it, it's become a gold standard for education. They have mobile application, they have website, they have tablet offering for multiple courses being offered at times that you can't really go to the school and college. So they have brought education to you. A zero distance has been created. It's completely heterogeneous in terms of the kind of education you can get from there and the kind of delivery platforms that you have for that. Uber again have various of the applications that they have. IWG, the office sharing office company, you know, the much older than what WeWork is, and they have actually different brands that they have launched. And those of you who are interested in it, you can actually go back to IWG and you can see that how they have brought in heterogeneity from hotel to headquarters spaces. And then they have different business pockets that they have developed in terms of the local needs that they could identify in the marketplace. Completely heterogeneous. They're not staying in one layer. They're not staying in one market. They're not staying in one delivery. They're saying that we are going to be mixing everything and delivering to the marketplace the way the marketplace needs it. Multiplicity, as we talked about it, is a way of doing things in different ways from different layers. OYO is working spaces. Where is into weddings. They have gone into weddings in a big way. So there are multiple layers that they're bringing together to offer all-inclusive service. Apple, you know, one company which has been shutting down stores in the US like nobody could ever imagine. Every time there is a crisis, they're actually shutting down stores. They couldn't care less because their stores deliveries have been of the order of 10%. The rest of the things are all coming through the e-commerce platform, so they are not really impacted by the shutdown as much as they would have been had they been dependent on the brick and mortar kind of delivery. Uber has Uber Eats. It's all known to us. Uber Fresh is a new initiative that has begun. Again, IWG, they have come into franchising. They have offloaded their operations in Japan, Taiwan, Switzerland. Switzerland is a home office for them. And about $560 million is from the licensing route that they have got. A Multiplicity, a company which believed that we are going to be managing all our resources by ourselves. They are saying that no, we are also going to have another pie, and that pie is by licensees. So Multiplicity is the other pillar which is emerging out of this crisis, and that's actually going to strengthen the way we do business. And as Alberto mentioned, that tomorrow, sorry, as Marco mentioned, that tomorrow if there's a new pandemic, are we going to get stuck again? Are we going to be on the learning curve? The answer possibly is no. It's not going to be, because through these strategic interventions, we are going to build capabilities, which is going to make us to offer solutions on the fly, as they say. The last one is relational realignment. Very interesting. This is something that we never thought of. Inox is a movie theater chain in India. They run about 800 screens all over the country, and they've gone into paperless ticketing. We are expecting that 1st of August, possibly, the movie theaters are going to be allowed to operate. So they have already prepared themselves. They have gone into a completely contactless kind of situation, paperless ticketing. They have gone into staggered show timings. They're trying to use more time. They're going to be having less people in one show, but they're going to be having more number of shows coming in differently through artificial intelligence. They have figured out how the shows are going to be timed for what kind of an audience, so that they can have more, in the course of the day, you can have more shows coming in. And then of course the change in menu, the food being served by them, and other infrastructural changes. They're thinking about having separators between, firstly, there is going to be alternate seating. And even in that alternate seating, they're planning to have the separators coming in, almost creating a cocoon and making it safe for everybody. OYO is reaching out to state governments to offer their properties for pay-per-use quarantine facilities. Right now, that was the biggest call that the companies had to take. AB InBev, another company which has gone into distribution among hospitals and frontline workers for sanitizers. They have a large facility that they can make sanitizers. If you all remember, sanitizers and PPEs became the first shortfall in the marketplace while fighting for COVID. This preparedness is going to make us ready for future. Zara, a fashion chain that we could ever imagine that they will be bringing in masks. Masks are becoming style statements. They are creating a marketplace for it, and they're filling in that marketplace by their own activities. And these are the kind of relational realignment which is allowing companies to reimagine their presence, bring in resilience. This is what resilience is all about, that we are not really going to break down. We are going to make sure that our job to be done is continuously satisfied by looking at it very, very differently. So these four pillars, where do they bring it to? Very interestingly, they bring it to a situation where we are actually looking about something called a zero distance. A very, very popular concept which is doing the rounds now. You will realize that this unknown, this quadrant is actually altering everything the way we want to do it. Look at future state of mobility. Mobility is something which in a city like Mumbai, where millions of people travel like a can of sardines, they travel from one place to the other place for all kinds of work. What the future state of mobility is coming here is very interestingly, one of the first commercial applications of Hyperloop is going to be by Virgin Atlantic, a company which has come in. The first commercial Hyperloop is expected to be installed between Mumbai and Pune. Pune is a city, a thriving city, 150 kilometers east of Bombay, and the first Hyperloop has been planned over there. And in this Hyperloop, future proofing against future pandemics are being planned. How? Because these are going to be the future technologies. So as we all know, that Hyperloops are actually pods, each pod having a capacity of carrying 14 passengers. And these 14 passengers are going to be in 14 individual cocoons. You are actually going to be walking into your own cocoon in your own atmosphere, so that you are not exposed to the external injuries that can come to you through contamination. So that is a futuristic thinking that is coming in. Then the contactless ticketing and traveling, they're making it completely contactless. Everything is going to be done by you on your smartphone. That is going to be your one enabling, which is going to stay with you. All the traffic is going to be managed by artificial intelligence. The operations are going to be very compact and high speed operation at very high frequency. It's like the cars travel between two chevrons distance. The cars travel very safely. Similarly, there's going to be a safe distance of travel of the cocoon of these Hyperloops. And these pods are going to be large numbers. At any given point of time, there could be hundreds of pods in the same pipe. And they're going to be carrying large number of people. They're expecting very large number of people are going to be transiting between the two cities, and there are going to be important stops in between. And this ability to transport large volume of passengers is going to bring sort of a zero distance experience with the people, because they will be moving fast, they'll be moving in their own way, and there'll be absolutely no contamination of what they do, and therefore they're going to be very safe. So this is future proofing against unknown. So this is going to be repeated by many people. You will see that a Hyperloop is going to create a zero distance, and that's what is going to be the future norm, which I am calling as at home, work from home, a new phenomenon. None of us believed that we could not go to the office days on end. Today, most of the companies today are in the 4th month, and many companies are actually today talking about a higher productivity during these 4 months than they have done before. Very simple to understand. In a city like Mumbai, you would be possibly commuting for 3 hours in a day. Those hours are not required to be spent anymore. You are at your home, in the comfort of your home. You are actually organizing yourself. So what was needed by that? We needed to create our own backbone, that we could have the digital infrastructure which could help us to do it. The same thing is going to expand, is going to be expanding to the healthcare. Today, telecommunication with the doctors by the patients has become the norm. There are more people who are being treated in a long distance on a zero distance than it was before. Earlier on, the norm was to go to the hospital. No doctor would like to take your call or speak to you, but a pandemic has made sure that you are now reaching that state where you are going to be comfortable at home, and many aspects of it. Elder care, there is going to be infant care, there is going to be entertainment, there is going to be health care, there is going to be education, there is going to be food, anything that you name, all these things, the paradigms are going to shift completely. So I think from the moving away from the pandemic, going into the future, where we are seeing a futuristic service PMI in India showing 55.2, it's purely because a lot of it is going to be going into this new prospect of at home, work from home. Many things are going to change. The hyperlocal is going to be even more sensitive to individual needs, and thereafter we are going to have a wholesome experience of living life in a way that we would love to. We wouldn't like to be grounded again by another pandemic. This is humanity's fight to pandemic, and very interestingly, most companies today are talking about sustainability to be built into this new capability. Sustainability will mean that our Earth days are going to be, we are going to be consuming less and less of natural resources, and we are going to be safe for the future. So that's the Indian view coming from the strategic perspective. And with this, I think the presentation from my side is over. And it will be now time for us to interact with the questions. And over to you, Alberto, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, Abhijit. You have to switch off the microphone because there is an echo.
Yeah, just give me a moment, please.
Yeah, thank you. Rispondiamo alle domande, direi. So, I see. Scusa.
Yeah.
Professor, you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Tu mi senti? In any case, I'm trying to answer to the first question regarding the fact that people don't have money enough to buy expensive product like in the fashion industry, Italian goods. I have two ways of answering this question. The first one is that during crisis, usually we see a kind of polarization of consumption, okay? So, I mean, if we take the luxury brands, in any case, we see that there will be someone buying, okay? They are recovering, even if they are using different way for, let's say, promoting the collection. If we take the other brands, there are, I think, two keywords. One is focusing, and the second one is complexity reduction. Focusing means that given the fact that we are not working full potential now, we have to focus on some specific brands, some specific products, some specific customer willing to receive also, let's say, the material, the product. And the second point is complexity reduction. We see Italian companies in the fashion industry are reducing, for instance, the range of the collection. They are trying to reduce a minimum the batches. So, I mean, the idea is stay on the market, but with a specific focus on that. And this is something it works because some companies are doing a proper way. I give you an example, which is not Italian, it's Spanish, it's Zara. Zara had a big impact from, let's say, the pandemic, but now they are quickly recovering. They decided to cut almost 20% of the shops. They are moving quickly into the e-commerce. They are reducing the range of collection. And right now, for instance, according to the last data, their financial data are better than H&M and the other competitors. Then I see a second question, which is, how do we see disruption happening in the finance industry? Well, I'm not a finance guy, I'm operations guy, but I can tell you what I see here in Italy. There are two big, trends. One is concentration. I mean, small banks, small financial, let's say, companies are merging, and the idea is to reduce the number of operators. And the second point is digital transformation. Okay, unfortunately, this has the other side of the coin is the unemployment, because especially the huge retail banking are laying off people, but they are moving quite quickly into the digital. Okay, so the digital transformation has been accelerated by the lockdown, and this is something that will never come back. I think that will be a balance between what we do in face-to-face and what we do in distance, but the push we receive, even let's say customers that they didn't use internet or web or any kind of app until 2 months ago, now is accustomed to use Teams, Zoom, any kind of app. So I think that digital transformation will be key also in this industry. Regarding the questionnaire, I can tell you that it was spread during April and May, so during the full lockdown, to Italian companies using our, let's say, network of, contact we have in the School of Management. And the questions were mainly question of, let's say, perspective based on Likert scale. So moving from 1 to 7, okay, what do you think about that? And this is the kind of answer we receive. Regarding the automotive industry, I'm not sure I understood perfectly the question, but on my side, I think that also in this industry, we need to reach a minimum critical mass for competing. This is something even Mr. Marchionne, the CEO that unfortunately passed away of Group Fiat CFA, said that we need to reach a minimum amount of 7 billion pieces for stay on the market and gaining competitiveness. Also here, I think that most companies are trying to work in terms of, let's say, complexity reduction by using, for instance, platform in design new, let's say, family of products. In terms of extra safety strap integrated into assembly line, I think that in Europe at least, most countries are, let's say, providing incentives, financial or fiscal incentives for moving into Industry 4.0. Okay, and especially in the car industry, in the automotive industry, if I think to Germany, I think to Italy, I think to France, we have a lot of investment in this area. The span of the research I already mentioned before, it was the 2 months during the lockdown, and it was a kind of quick and dirty survey with the idea of understanding what's going on during the lockdown and which are the forecasts for the next months. And this is something we share also with Italian alumni and network we have. I go through the other question if I'm able, but of course, also my colleague can answer. In this pandemic times, how companies should approach to calculate the optimum safety stock. This is a $1 million question, in my opinion. Okay, it's not easy to calculate safety stock. I think that we could move from the concept of safety stock, which is something we build against a probability of something will occur, to strategic stock. Okay, strategic stock means something different. It's not related to something which is probabilistic or stochastic. It's related to the idea of building. Of course, it's expensive, a buffer against something which is unpredictable, how it was the pandemic, okay? So I think that there are two different concepts. The concept of safety stock is related to a stochastic phenomenon. The concept of strategic stock is something related to something we are not able to plan, but we want to, let's say, defend our company from that. Then there is a question related to the move from lean supply chain to agile supply chain, real-time supply chain visibility, which require investment. Yes, I would say I agree. I fully agree with the idea of investing in IT, let's say, system, because this is key. What Marco said before, and you are, Parag, saying, is that we need a system able to, let's say, react quite immediately to any kind of change. Let me complete the reading of the question. To move from lean supply chain to agile, one of the main factors is organization should focus real-time supply chain visibility. Yes, yes. I would say that according to our experience, the size of the investment we need are much lower than the positive impact we can create. So I would say that in this case, the return on investment is huge. So there is a kind of leverage. It is clear that you need enough money to invest in this kind of technologies, and then you'll see the results. In any case, we need to have this kind of end-to-end visibility, because we are not able to forecast everything. Marco said before, we need to plan with a different approach, which is a kind of multi-scenario approach. Okay, so having tools for simulating different scenarios, using, let's say, simulation for checking the results, and then take a decision, which is in any case a risky decision, because during this period, okay, we have to mitigate risk, but it's impossible to eliminate this kind of risk. I see that there is another question from Niraf. Is the government stimulus an effective solution to revival the industry production and demand levels? I would say probably is not enough, but is a good, let's say, lever, I would say. Especially right now in Europe, I don't know if you are aware of, the EU decided to invest a huge amount of money in different countries, and Italy will benefit of that. We are talking about of 10 times the average, let's say, financial maneuver we have every year. And most of that are split in two sides. On the one side for stimulating the demand, because in any case, people should buy, otherwise, I mean, we are stuck in the middle. And on the other hand, investing in company with probably fiscal taxation relief for giving the opportunity to move ahead. I think that the intervention on government can't substitute the market law, but especially during the transition phase can help in moving in a further step. You said, Hussein asked me if in the survey we had mainly small and medium-sized companies, also large companies. We had any kind of companies, but you have to take into consideration that the sample is representing the Italian situation. And the Italian situation is mainly made by small and medium-sized companies, and we had also some large companies. 70% of the companies we analyzed were above 1 billion euros, okay? Which is for us, Italy is a small country, okay, a large company. So we had mainly small and medium size, but let's say 1/5 of the interviewee were coming from that. What would be the strategy for construction industry to sustain the present scenario? Again, I think that the only way is to have a huge intervention by the government for sustaining, let's say, infrastructure activities. For instance, In Italy, we have right now a huge debate regarding 20 different huge infrastructure, which means new motorways, new tunnels, new high-speed train. This is the only way, because if we go to real estate, unfortunately, the real estate is suffering a lot. I don't know if you, Abhijit, want to answer to the question of the comparative figures for Indian and Italian industry. Should we expect V-type recovery for Indian and U-type for Italian? I'm not able to answer for Indians, honestly. I think that maybe Abhijit can answer. I think that for Italy, we hope to have a U-type and not a L-type, because L-type means that we stay in a kind of stagflation for a long period, like it happens in Japan in the last 20 years. I think it will be a U-shape. Maybe in India, can be a V-shape, even because in any case in India the crisis will be huge, but in the last forecast of the International Monetary Fund, you still have a positive GDP. I don't know, Abhijit, can you hear me? If you,
Yes,
if you
yes,
want to answer by switching on the microphone.
Right, right. Am I audible now?
I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear, but can you hear me?
Yes, Professor, you are audible.
Yes. So a few things. Of course, the first one. Thank you, Alberto. I think you have touched on all the aspects of the survey that was presented, and very interestingly, we at least can see some answers coming out of all these deliberations now. To come back to this question of whether the V or U, now there are as many economists and as many predictions which are coming up, but the marketplace and also going by what we are sensing from the service pickup, it looks like that there is going to be a polarization of doing business in India the way India business has been done so far. And there is a huge unspent demand, and that's going to be coming up. And there is going to be a healthy rebound, so to say. Unfortunately for India, the high season of the festivals have all been sucked into this COVID-19 pandemic. We will not have anything to do with the consumption that happens in the third quarter of our financial year, that's between October and December. But the unspent demand is going to be continuing. A whole lot of new kind of demands will come in. We have been, fortunately for the economy, we are pretty prepared digitally. I think we are as much prepared to support this pandemic, coming out of the pandemic in a digital way, as many of the other developed countries, so to say. This is the highlight of the Indian recovery. So to me, and also going by the spot survey that was done for the Indian CEOs, I think chances are that we will be seeing a recovery in the next calendar year, and of course in the next financial year. Infrastructurally, there's huge investments which have been planned. The fiscal stimuli that's been talked about, money is very easy right now, but unfortunately there is no demand, there is no consumption. The private investments have actually stagnated. It's going to take a little time, but the large investments coming from the strategic perspective, from the national interest, the roads and highways, the railways, the high-speed corridors, the airports, the metros, all these put together, there is going to be a trickle-down effect which is going to be kicking in. So my own optimistic view is that we may be into a V shape, but maybe a little flattened V shape. It's not going to be the sharp V that we normally talk about. After 2008, we had a very, very sharp V. By 2011, we were responding to a very, very aggressive market. May not be so this time, but recovery is going to be there. And once recovery comes in, it's going to stay, because the country today, through this huge population today, has been sensitized in terms of being future-proof. The results are there. The recovery rates of COVID-19 in most pockets are pretty high. Though the infection is also spreading, but in a large country like ours, that should not be actually a matter of conjecture coming from the futuristic prospect of the recovery of the economy itself. While I talk about this, the last question comes from Usha Mrida, and she talks about how will grassroots communities survive in the wake of reverse labor. India has had possibly the brightest community economy. There are pockets. There are pockets where utensils are made, which are actually meant for the grassroots community. You know, fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, as you talk about, there are many of the fortunes are being built at the grassroots through this community economy, and therefore the community economy survival chances are very high because there is a very strong collaboration among themselves. They survive as a supply chain and they do not survive as individuals, and that is